Manatee Rescue. We are at the end of our story, so let's find out what happens. Manuela visited Ariue whenever she could. Sometimes Libya and Tentico came too. The manatee still seemed to know Manuela and would come to the side of the pool and push out its bristly snout when she dangled her feet over the edge. One afternoon, Manuela was rubbing Ariue's back with her hand when Raffi came down to the pool and sat beside her. "So," she said in her usual direct way, "isn't it time you kept your promise and got to number 5 on the action plan?" "But we haven't checked off number 4 yet," Manuela protested. "That's true," said Raffi, "but Ariue has so many friends now, I think it's safe for him to go back." Manuela knew her granny was right. It wasn't fair to keep Ariue in this little pool when he could be free to wander the whole river. She nodded. Yes, it's time. The whole family wanted to help return Ariue to the river. Libya consulted the records in the journal and chose a place where manatees had been seen. Louis offered his big boat to take them there. Gonzaga, Jorge, Abel, and of course, Silvio said that they would lift Ariue into the boat. And Angelina said she had an airbed to protect him from the bumps on the journey. They set the date and agreed to meet at the river bend early in the morning before it grew too hot. Manuela and Libya stayed with Raffi the night before on the floor of Raffi's room. Manuela lay awake in the first light, staring at the fading stars through her window. "You're awake, aren't you?" Libya whispered. "Yes. Should we go and say goodbye before everyone gets here?" The sky was pearl gray, and the sandbanks on either side of the low river showed like pale arms in the early light. Birds called, and the last bats flitted in the shadows. They hadn't visited Ariue at this time since he had been a little calf needing to be fed milk every few hours. Now he was a big grown-up, much larger than the 2 girls put together. His smooth, dark shape lay under the water, partly covered by a wreath of his favorite foods. The girls knelt at the edge of the pool with Tentico between them, and Manuela tapped the water with her fingers. The familiar bristly nose broke through the surface. Then Ariue's whole head came to rest on the side of the pool between the girls, nose to nose with Tentico. His small eyes looked out at the world of dry land. For a moment, everything held quite still, and then the sound of approaching motorboats broke the quietness. It wasn't just one boat or even 2. Almost the whole village of San Lorenzo had turned out to help their friend, the manatee. Only Gomez's boat was missing. And here's a picture, and they're going to have there's a whole parade of boats in the background. You can see them all. Manuela wished that Ariue could understand what was happening to him. The trip in the boat could be frightening, and when they let him go, he might feel very alone. But she knew that he would soon feel at home in the river, where he should have been all this time. They passed a tarp under Ariue's body to act like a sling. Then they drained the pond. He was bigger than anyone had imagined, so it was a good thing that all the strongest men in the village were there to help. They lifted him out of the pool as gently as they could, then over the sandbank and into the boat. Ariue rested on the airbed and was wrapped in wet sheets to keep him cool and comfortable. Then they set off, a fiesta of boats full of smiling, singing people, with one bewildered manatee in the heart. Manuela sat beside him all the time. "It's going to be all right," she told Ariue. "You're going home." And then the next part is called the Epilogue, and that's what happens after the story. So we don't know how long after. This might be a long time after. I don't know. Let's find out. For weeks after Ariue was gone, Manuela said, "Stay safe, Ariue, stay safe," every night when she lay down to sleep. But as the weeks turned to months, more and more people told her or Libya or Silvio or Raffi that they had seen a manatee with a mark like lightning on its back. Little by little, Manuela stopped worrying and began to believe that Ariue was safely back in his true home. More than a year later, Manuela was on a sandbank with Silvio and a group of kids from Silvio's new ecology club. They were searching for turtle nests to move to a safe hatching place where they couldn't be dug up for food by anyone passing by on the river. It was fun running around on the sand looking for the telltale signs of turtle tracks. The smallest boy in the group, whom they called Ant because of his size, was the best at it. He and Libya waved to Manuela from the far end of the bank, calling out to her that they had found a nest. But there was something distracting Manuela's attention. A boat, big and fast. It was Gomez's boat, not coming upriver as usual, but down from the lakes where Manatee spent the dry season. It wobbled in the heat haze, but Manuela could see Gomez's oldest son at the helm and Gomez at the bow, and he was shouting at the top of his voice, "Manatee! Manatee!" No one ran down to the boat. No one helped carry the huge body onto the bank, so Gomez and his son brought up the meat in batches. 3 men stood next to the pile where the manatee had lay. Children walked past carrying the turtle eggs. "Told you I'd get my property in the end," Gomez taunted. "That nice white scar was a great target to go after." Manuela stared at the chunks of meat, searching for a sign to see if it was in fact Ariway, but there was none. Silvio came up the bank like a rocket, but Manuela caught his arm. "Don't fight with him, Papa. There's something much better you can do while we take care of the eggs." Gomez shouted until he was hoarse, but no one bought his manatee meat. He and his sons had to carry the meat away. Meanwhile, Silvio quietly went to every house and every boat, talking to every person. When he knew the whole village felt the same way as he did, he went to see Louis and said, "We need to make a call on your phone, brother." Louis nodded. "The number for the police is in my memory," said Louis. Killing manatees had been illegal for years, but it was impossible for the police to know what went on in all the little villages all along the river. They were very far away from the city, unless someone told them, and now someone had. Gomez was given plenty of warning. Louis told him that it would take the police launch at least 2 hours to get to San Lorenzo. That was easy enough time for Gomez to load his boat with the manatee meat and his 2 sons and leave forever, which is exactly what he did, watched in complete silence by every family in San Lorenzo. As Gomez disappeared up the river, shouting threats and insults until he was out of earshot, Silvio put his hand on Manuela's shoulder and said, "No one in this village will ever kill another manatee again. Not ever." In the 5 years that followed, fishermen up and down the river often saw a manatee with a white scar on its back. And if they had been thinking of throwing a spear, they changed their minds. No one wanted to kill the famous Ariway. But Manuela thought Ariway was dead. Granny Raffi didn't believe it. You didn't see a white mark on the chopped up meat of Gomez. Gomez just pretended that manatee was Ariway just to spite you. Manuela didn't know. Then one day, when Manuela, Libya, and Aunt were coming back from the village downriver where they had been performing one of Libya's puppet shows, their outboard motor failed. They paddled into a lagoon to fix the engine. It was a beautiful sunny afternoon. Little grasshoppers plinked on the floating vegetation. A fly landed on the boat. "One nice thing about a broken engine," said Aunt, "is we get some peace." On the opposite side of the lagoon, floating weeds trembled, and there was a swirl on the surface. Not quite a ripple, not quite a bubble. Manuela pointed. "Manatee," she said. "Manatee." Psst. The snout of 2 nostrils kissed the surface of the water. Below it, in the still, shadowy water, there was a flash of white, like the memory of a summer storm passing in a long night sky. It was Ariway. Manuela's heart sang. I kept my promise after all, she thought. I kept my promise to Ariway and his mother. And that's the end. And then at the end tells, and there's the real Ariway. And the back of the story tells that they have been educating the people, and there's two girls and their father, and they're making signs and telling everybody. And so it says, I'll read you about ARUA. All right. This story began after a real-life incident took place. An injured manatee calf was rescued and passed on to Sarita Kendall, who was the founder of Natumana, which is an organization to try and help the manatees. Sarita and her helpers worked over 2 years to restore the calf to health, to feed it, care for it, and finally to wean it so it would be able to survive in the wild. The calf was named ARUA, which is the native name for manatee. Many people in Puerto Narino got involved in ARUA's care. He became a celebrity, and when it was time for him to be returned to the river, almost all the village came along. He was fitted with a radio collar that Sarita and her team could use to track and check on him to make sure he was safe. At the same time, the collar gathered valuable information about manatee behavior. For several months, Sarita and the team of local fishermen spent hours every day watching ARUA and learning more and more about manatees. Eventually, ARUA's collar dropped off, so it wasn't possible to keep track of him. But when a manatee was killed by one of the local fishermen, who had always been determined to continue to kill manatees, he was reported to the police and he left his village. Since that time, not one person in Puerto Narino nor the neighboring villages nearby have killed a manatee. Fishermen and their families say that they will never hunt manatees, and they want their grandchildren to be able to see manatees for themselves. Now all the school children from Puerto Narino and from communities up and down the river across Colombia visit Natuma's thatched headquarters. They learn about manatees and the animals and plants that share the environment. They visit exhibitions, and they learn through songs, games, stories, and puppet shows. They have a big open house gala and local festivities. They even bake manatee cookies, just like in the story. Natuma's workers still visit villages across the border in Peru and Brazil to remind the people of their connection with the natural world and the value of all wildlife. Fishermen are employed to help monitor the population of manatees in the area, and they report over 500 sightings of manatees every year. And then there is a website. So I'll post a picture of that website so you can see it. And there are some pictures the kids drew, just like in the story. All right, so that was our second story in Heroes of the Wild.